Admiral Jack Morrison stood at the viewing port of Omega 7 station and watched the Zephyrian ships position themselves around the neutral meeting place. The alien vessels were massive and sleek with energy fields that glowed like captured lightning. Each ship could destroy a human colony with a single blast from their main weapons. Morrison had seen them do exactly that many times over the past 14 years of war. Captain Lisa Hayes walked up beside him and handed him a datapad. Her face looked tired, but her eyes were sharp and alert. She had been studying the enemy fleet movements for hours, and something did not feel right to her. Zephyrians were acting like they expected trouble instead of celebrating their victory over humanity. "Sir, the enemy ships are not in celebration formation," Hayes said quietly, so the other delegates could not hear her words. "They are positioning for defense like they think we might attack them." Morrison looked at the data and nodded slowly. The Zephyrians had won this war completely and totally. Human colonies had fallen one by one until only Earth and a handful of mining worlds remained under human control. The alien empire had superior technology and more ships than humanity could ever hope to build. They should be relaxed and confident right now. "Maybe they know something we do not know," Morrison replied and handed the pad back to Hayes. His voice stayed calm, but his mind was racing through possibilities. Commander Rick Johnson had sent him some very interesting intelligence reports in the past few weeks. Several human colonies had gone completely silent, but the Zephyrians claimed they had not attacked those worlds. The main conference room of Omega 7 was filled with representatives from dozens of different species. The Zephyrian Empire controlled most of this part of the galaxy, and many alien races had joined them willingly or been forced to submit. High Chancellor Vextar sat at the head of the long table with his advisors around him. His blue skin had darker patches that showed his mood, and right now those patches indicated satisfaction and pride. Morrison took his seat across from the Chancellor and tried to look like a defeated military leader. It was not hard to do since humanity really had lost this war in every way that mattered. The terms of the peace treaty were harsh but not completely unreasonable. Humans would be allowed to keep Earth and 3 mining colonies. They could have no more than 50 military ships, and those had to be inspected by Zephyrian officials every 6 months. All human space travel outside their designated zones required permission from the Empire. Admiral Morrison, Chancellor Vextar, said in perfect English. The Zephyrians had studied human languages and culture for years during the war. "Your species fought bravely, but you must understand that resistance is no longer possible. Accept these terms and your people will live in peace under our protection." Morrison nodded and picked up the signing stylus. The room became very quiet as cameras recorded this moment for history. The great human rebellion was ending not with a dramatic battle, but with signatures on a legal document. Every species in the galaxy would know that even the stubborn and unpredictable humans could be brought to heel by superior force, but Hayes noticed something else as she watched the ceremony. A small communication device in her pocket vibrated 3 times, then paused, then vibrated 3 times again. That was the signal she had been waiting for. She glanced at Morrison and saw him give the slightest nod possible. He had felt his device signal too. "The human species accepts these terms," Morrison said formally and signed his name to the treaty. Chancellor Vextar signed next, and then the other representatives added their marks to make the agreement official. Flash photography lit up the room as reporters captured images of humanity's surrender. What none of the aliens knew was that 6 months ago Morrison had received orders from Earth's shadow government. A group of human leaders had been preparing for this moment since the war began. They knew humanity could not win a direct fight against the Zephyrian Empire, but they had other plans. The treaty signing was not the end of human resistance. It was the beginning of something much bigger and more dangerous. Commander Johnson slipped into the conference room just as the ceremony ended. He walked up to Morrison and whispered in his ear, "Protocol 7 is active, sir. All silent colonies report ready. Production numbers exceed expectations by 40%. Morrison felt a cold smile try to form on his lips, but he kept his face neutral. The Zephyrians thought they had beaten humanity, but they had no idea what humans could accomplish. when they had their backs against the wall. Those silent colonies had not been destroyed or abandoned. They had been evacuated of civilians and converted into the largest military production operation in human history. Hayes intercepted another signal on her device as the delegates began to leave the conference room. This message came directly from Earth and contained only 2 words that made her heart race with excitement. Tomorrow begins. The Zephyrian fleet began to withdraw from the station within hours of the treaty signing. Chancellor Vextar returned to his capital world confident that the human problem had been solved permanently. His military advisors recommended keeping some ships in human space to watch for trouble, but Vextar dismissed their concerns. Humans were beaten and would stay beaten. Morrison and Hayes returned to their transport ship along with the other human delegates. Once they were safely in space and away from alien monitoring devices, Morrison called a meeting of his senior staff. The time for pretending was over and the real war was about to begin. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison said to his officers, "we have successfully completed the most important deception in human history. The enemy thinks we are defeated, and they are withdrawing their main battle fleets. In 18 hours, we will show them exactly how wrong they are about humanity." Commander Beth Turner guided her stealth ship through the asteroid field near Kepler 438b and tried to understand what her sensors were telling her. The mining colony below should have been producing basic titanium ore for the Zephyrian Empire, according to the treaty agreements. Instead, her equipment detected massive energy signatures that indicated heavy industrial production far beyond simple mining operations. "Captain, the readings do not match what we expected to find here," said Lieutenant Kate Robinson from the sensor station. She had been monitoring Zephyrian communications for months and knew their patrol schedules perfectly. "This place is producing 10 times more materials than any mining colony should be able to make." Turner nodded and adjusted their position to get better scanning angles. 6 months had passed since the peace treaty was signed, and the Zephyrians were becoming suspicious about human activities in the outer colonies. Several inspection teams had found empty facilities and compliant human administrators, but the numbers did not add up. Someone was building something big and trying very hard to hide it. What Turner did not know was that 3 kilometers below the surface of Kepler 438b, Colonel Steve Parker was overseeing the final assembly of humanity's new battle fleet. The underground shipyard stretched for miles in every direction and employed over 50,000 workers, who had been secretly relocated from evacuated colonies. The facility was one of 12 identical installations hidden throughout human space. Dr. Amanda Clark walked through the weapons testing facility and smiled at what her team had accomplished. The quantum-phased cannons mounted on the new ships could penetrate Zephyrian energy shields like they did not exist. Human engineers had taken captured alien technology and improved it using methods that the original designers had never considered. Desperation and creativity made a powerful combination. The latest test results show 97% effectiveness against Zephyrian defensive systems, reported her assistant as they watched a target shield collapse under the new weapon fire. "Our simulations indicate that a single human ship equipped with these weapons can destroy 3 Zephyrian vessels before they can react." Clark had spent her entire career studying alien technology, and she knew that humans approached engineering problems differently than other species. Where aliens relied on established principles and proven methods, humans were willing to try completely new approaches that might fail spectacularly or succeed beyond all expectations. In this case, the crazy human ideas had worked perfectly. "Captain." Tony Miller stood on the bridge of what looked like an ordinary cargo hauler, but was actually the most advanced warship humanity had ever built. The UHS Falcon could transform from a harmless transport into a heavily armed battlecruiser in less than 4 minutes. Hidden weapon ports would open and armor plating would slide into position while the engines switched to military power levels. "Sir, we have received the deployment orders," his communications officer announced. "All disguised vessels are to take positions at their assigned coordinates and wait for the attack signal. The Zephyrians still think we are just merchant ships carrying mining equipment." Miller looked at his crew and felt proud of what they had accomplished. These men and women had trained for months to operate the most sophisticated equipment humans had ever developed. They were ready to take on an enemy that had dominated the galaxy for centuries, and they were confident they could win. General Linda Foster coordinated the largest military operation in human history from a command center, hidden inside an abandoned mine on Earth's moon. Holographic displays showed the positions of over 3,000 human ships scattered throughout Zephyrian space. Each vessel was disguised as civilian traffic or hidden in locations where enemy patrols would not think to look. General, all units. Report ready for Operation Thunderbolt, her chief of staff announced. We have ships positioned to strike 17 key enemy systems simultaneously. The Zephyrians have no idea what is about to hit them. Foster had been planning this moment since the day the war began. She knew that humanity could not win through superior firepower or advanced technology, but they could win through deception. And surprise! The peace treaty had given them exactly what they needed most, which was time to prepare and the enemy's overconfidence. Lieutenant Robinson aboard Turner's ship detected something that made her heart stop. A massive underground chamber had just opened on the surface of Kepler 438b and ships were emerging. Not just a few ships, but dozens of them rising from concealed hangar bays that had been invisible until now. These were not civilian vessels or mining equipment, but full military warships. Commander, you need to see this, Robinson said urgently. The entire surface is opening up and there are ships everywhere. These are not supposed to exist according to the treaty terms. Turner watched in amazement as the hidden fleet deployed into formation. Each ship was larger and more heavily armed than anything humanity was supposed to possess. The Zephyrians had been completely fooled by the greatest military deception in galactic history. While they thought they were managing a defeated enemy, the humans had been building an invasion force. Captain Roy Davis emerged from his underground facility and looked up at the stars where Zephyrian patrol ships had been monitoring human activities. His teams had spent months perfecting the art of hiding massive construction projects from alien sensors. They had built entire cities underground and covered them with holographic projectors that made the surface look empty and abandoned. All teams, this is Davis, he announced over the secure communication network. Operation Thunderbolt begins in 6 hours. Every Zephyrian in the galaxy is about to learn that humans do not stay defeated when someone tries to make us into slaves, Dr. Clark made final adjustments to the weapon systems and sent her approval to the fleet commanders. The quantum phase technology was ready for combat and the test results showed it would be devastatingly effective against enemy shields. The Zephyrians had taught humanity about their technology during the war, but they had never imagined that humans would be able to improve upon it. Turner realized that her stealth ship was now surrounded by the emerging human fleet and she needed to get word back to Zephyrian command immediately. But as she tried to activate her communication system, she discovered that human jamming technology was blocking all transmissions. The trap had been sprung and there was no way to warn the Empire about what was coming. General Foster looked at the countdown timer on her command display and felt the weight of history on her shoulders. In less than 6 hours, the largest coordinated military strike ever attempted would begin. Thousands of human ships would decloak simultaneously across dozens of star systems, and the Zephyrian Empire would discover that the species they had defeated was very much alive and ready for war. Admiral Paul Wright watched the countdown timer reach 0 and gave the order that would change galactic history forever. All units execute Operation Thunderbolt, he announced over the fleet communication system. Around him, the bridge crew of the UHS Liberty worked with calm efficiency as humanity's largest military operation began across 17 star systems. Human ships suddenly appeared from hyperspace or decloaked from hidden positions. The Zephyrian Empire had no warning as vessels that were not supposed to exist opened fire on their patrol fleets and orbital stations. In the first 60 seconds of the attack, over 200 enemy ships were destroyed by weapons that could pierce their shields like paper. Captain Nancy Green led her assault force toward the Zephyrian Naval Academy at Proxima Tau, where the Empire trained its future officers. The facility was heavily defended, but the aliens had positioned their weapons to repel attacks from space, not from ships that could appear anywhere. Using human hyperspace technology, Green Squadron materialized inside the defensive perimeter and began landing troops before the enemy could react. "All boarding teams, this is Green," she announced as her Marines stormed the Academy buildings. "Remember that we want prisoners, not casualties. These cadets and instructors are worth more to us alive than dead because they know everything about Zephyrian military doctrine." Major Chris Brown led the ground assault on 12 different Zephyrian colonies simultaneously using the new powered armor suits that made human soldiers faster and stronger than their alien opponents. The suits were painted black with red stripes, and the sight of them terrified enemy defenders who had never seen humans move with such speed and power. The key to the human attack was the complete surprise they achieved against an enemy that thought the war was over. Dr. Janet Scott had spent months studying Zephyrian psychology and battle tactics to find weaknesses that human commanders could exploit. She discovered that alien military computers could not adapt quickly to the chaotic and unpredictable methods that humans used in combat. Colonel Gary Lewis demonstrated this weakness during the battle at Rigel Station, where his small fleet of 30 ships faced over 150 Zephyrian vessels. Instead of using standard military tactics, Lewis ordered his ships to attack in seemingly random patterns that confused the enemy targeting systems. The alien computers could not calculate proper responses to maneuvers that made no logical sense. "All ships follow my lead and remember that being unpredictable is our greatest weapon," Lewis announced as his fleet charged directly into the center of the enemy formation. The Zephyrians tried to surround the human ships, but Lewis had his vessels break formation and attack individual targets from completely unexpected directions. Commander Helen Brooks led the most dangerous mission of the entire operation, which was the capture of the Zephyrian capital ship ZFS Dominion. The massive vessel served as a mobile command center for the entire enemy fleet, and its loss would cripple their ability to coordinate defensive actions. Brooks had trained her boarding teams for months to fight inside alien ship layouts. The Dominion was protected by energy shields and point defense weapons that should have made it impossible to approach, but human engineers had developed new stealth technology specifically for this mission. Brooks' ships appeared to be destroyed by enemy fire, but were actually protected by holographic projectors that made them look like debris while they continued toward their target. "Boarding teams prepare for assault," Brooks announced as her ships attached to the hull of the Dominion using magnetic clamps. "Remember that we need to reach their command center before they can destroy their computer systems. Move fast and stay together." The human Marines fought their way through the corridors of the alien ship using tactics that the Zephyrians had never encountered before. Instead of advancing methodically like most species, humans used speed and aggression to overwhelm defensive positions before the enemy could organize proper resistance. Within 2 hours, Brooks' teams had captured the entire command deck. Admiral Wright received reports from all attack groups as Operation Thunderbolt continued to exceed all expectations. Human forces had successfully surprised the enemy at every target and were achieving victory after victory against opponents who should have been much stronger. The secret was that the Zephyrians had prepared to fight the same humans they had defeated 6 months ago, not the new military force that had emerged from the hidden facilities. Captain Green reported the successful capture of over 3,000 Zephyrian naval cadets and instructors who would provide humanity with detailed knowledge about enemy ship designs and battle procedures. Major Brown announced that all 12 colony invasions had succeeded with minimal human casualties and maximum enemy prisoners taken alive for intelligence gathering. The most shocking moment came when Commander Brooks activated the weapon systems of the captured Dominion and began firing on other Zephyrian ships. The sight of their own flagship attacking them broke the morale of enemy crews across multiple star systems. Many alien vessels simply stopped fighting and tried to surrender rather than face destruction from their own weapons. Colonel Lewis completed his impossible victory at Rigel Station by destroying or capturing the entire enemy fleet, while losing only 2 human ships. His tactical report would later become required reading at human military academies because it proved that unpredictable tactics could overcome superior numbers and technology when used by commanders who understood how to think outside traditional military doctrine. Dr. Scott monitored the psychological impact of the human attacks and confirmed that enemy morale was collapsing faster than their battle lines. The Zephyrians had believed their own propaganda about human inferiority, and the shock of discovering they were wrong was devastating to their confidence. Many enemy commanders were making poor decisions because they could not accept what was happening to their forces. Admiral Wright looked at the tactical displays showing human victories across 17 star systems and allowed himself to feel satisfied with the results. Operation Thunderbolt had achieved everything the planners had hoped for and more. The Zephyrian Empire was reeling from attacks they had never seen coming, and humanity had proven that reports of their defeat had been greatly exaggerated. "All commands, this is right," he announced to the human fleet. "Operation Thunderbolt is a complete success. We have caught the enemy completely off guard and achieved victory at every target. But remember that this is just the beginning. The real war starts now, and we must be ready to follow up these victories with continued pressure until the Empire surrenders unconditionally." Captain Frank Torres stood before a massive communication array and prepared to broadcast the message that would break Zephyrian morale across the entire galaxy. 3 weeks had passed since Operation Thunderbolt began, and human forces were pushing deeper into enemy territory with each passing day. Now it was time to attack the aliens, not just with weapons, but with words that would destroy their confidence from within. "Citizens of the Zephyrian Empire," Torres began his broadcast in perfect alien language. "Your leaders told you that humans were defeated and no longer a threat. Look around you now and see how wrong they were. Your fleets are burning and your colonies are falling because your commanders do not understand the species they tried to enslave." The broadcast reached millions of Zephyrian civilians and military personnel, simultaneously using captured enemy communication networks. Torres had studied alien psychology for months and knew exactly which words would cause maximum damage to their rigid social structure. He revealed the incompetence of their high command and questioned whether their leaders deserved the loyalty of their people. Dr. Bobby Mitchell smiled as he watched his computer viruses spread through Zephyrian networks like wildfire. The digital weapons were designed specifically to target alien technology and cause critical systems to malfunction at the worst possible moments. Enemy ships would lose power during battle or find their weapons refusing to fire when human forces attacked. "Doctor, the virus penetration is exceeding all projections," his assistant reported from the Cyber Warfare Center. "We have infected over 60% of their military network, and the malfunction rate is climbing rapidly. Their own technology is becoming unreliable, and they do not know how to stop it." Mitchell had spent years learning how Zephyrian computers operated, and he discovered that their systems were actually more vulnerable to cyber attacks than human technology. The aliens relied too heavily on automated systems and did not have the manual backup procedures that humans used when their equipment failed. This overconfidence in technology became a critical weakness. General Mary Price coordinated the most aggressive military campaign in human history as her forces pursued retreating Zephyrian fleets deep into enemy territory. Instead of consolidating their gains and defending captured systems, human commanders continued attacking and kept the aliens off balance with constant pressure that gave them no time to reorganize their defenses. "All fleet commanders, this is Price," she announced during the daily strategy meeting. "The enemy is retreating toward their core worlds, but we will not give them time to regroup. Maintain pursuit and keep hitting them before they can establish new defensive lines. We have them running scared, and we need to keep them that way." Captain Larry King led fast attack squadrons that specialized in hunting down Zephyrian supply convoys and destroying the logistics networks that kept enemy fleets operational. His ships were smaller and faster than traditional warships, but they carried enough firepower to cripple much larger vessels when they attacked in coordinated groups. Target confirmed as supply convoy carrying ammunition and fuel, King announced to his squadron. Remember that destroying their supplies is just as important as sinking their warships. An enemy fleet without ammunition cannot fight, and ships without fuel cannot run away from us. Commander Julie Adams commanded specialized boarding teams that captured alien installations and converted them for human use instead of simply destroying them. Her forces had taken over 12 major Zephyrian bases and turned their own defensive positions against them. This strategy demoralized enemy forces who watched their strongest fortifications become human strongholds. The psychological impact of seeing humans operate Zephyrian technology better than the aliens themselves was devastating to enemy morale. Major Eddie Thompson proved this when he successfully commanded a captured alien battleship during the engagement at Volf 359. His mixed crew of humans and alien prisoners worked together to defeat a Zephyrian rescue fleet that came to retake the vessel. "All hands, this is Thompson," he announced over the ship's communication system. "Today we proved that human crews can operate alien technology more effectively than its original designers. The enemy built good ships, but they never learned how to use them to their full potential because they lack the creativity and adaptability that makes us superior warriors." Admiral Patricia Hall led the human fleet into the Battle of Rigel 7, which was the first major engagement fought in a traditional Zephyrian stronghold system. The aliens had built massive orbital fortresses and defensive platforms that should have made the system impossible to attack, but human forces used tactics that turned the enemy's own weapons against them. Hall ordered her ships to hide behind the system's moons and asteroids, while special forces teams infiltrated the orbital platforms using stealth technology. Once the boarding parties captured key defensive positions, they turned the platform weapons on other enemy installations and created chaos throughout the defensive network. "All ships advance to attack formation," Hall announced as the enemy defenses collapsed. The aliens built impressive fortifications, but they forgot that their strongest weapons become our weapons once we capture them. This is what happens when an empire becomes too confident in its own superiority. The victory at Rigel 7 shocked the entire galaxy because it proved that humanity could defeat the Zephyrians even in their strongest defensive positions. News of the battle spread rapidly, and several alien species that had been forced to join the Empire began questioning whether their alliance was worth the cost of fighting such a dangerous opponent. Dr. Mitchell's cyber warfare campaign reached its peak when his viruses penetrated the main Zephyrian military command network and began feeding false information to their fleet commanders. Enemy ships received orders to retreat when they should have advanced, or found themselves attacking their own allies because the computer systems could no longer distinguish between human and Zephyrian vessels. Captain Torres expanded his psychological warfare broadcast to include testimonials from captured Zephyrian officers who admitted that human forces were superior in every aspect of military operations. These confessions from their own people had a devastating impact on alien morale and caused widespread desertion among units that had not yet encountered human forces directly. General Price received reports that the Zephyrian Empire was beginning to fracture as member species switched sides and brought their fleets to join the human cause. The Altarians were the first to officially change allegiance, followed quickly by the Centauran Federation and the Vegan Republic. Each defection brought new ships and knowledge that accelerated the collapse of Zephyrian power. "Ladies and gentlemen," Price announced to her senior staff, "we have achieved something that no one thought possible 6 months ago. The most powerful empire in the galaxy is falling apart because they underestimated the species they tried to make into slaves. The hunters have become the prey, and now they are learning what it feels like to be on the losing side of this war." High Chancellor Vexstar walked slowly through the corridors of Omega 7 Station and tried to understand how everything had gone so terribly wrong. 6 months ago, he had been the leader of the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and humans had signed a treaty accepting their defeat. Now his fleet was reduced to a few dozen ships, and he was coming here to beg for mercy from the species he had once considered primitive and defeated. Admiral Jack Morrison waited in the same conference room where the original peace treaty had been signed and reflected on how much had changed since that day. The human delegation was no longer playing the role of defeated representatives, but sat as the victors, who would dictate terms to a broken enemy. The irony of the situation was not lost on anyone present. Admiral Morrison, Chancellor Vextar, said as he entered the room with only 2 advisors remaining from his once large staff. "I come here today not as a conqueror but as a leader seeking to end this conflict before more lives are lost on both sides. Your species has proven itself capable of warfare beyond anything we imagined possible." Morrison stood and gestured for the Zephyrian leader to take a seat at the conference table. The room was filled with representatives from dozens of alien species, but now they were here to witness the dissolution of the empire that had dominated them for so long. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted completely in humanity's favor. "Chancellor, your empire is finished, and we both know it," Morrison replied calmly. "Your member species have abandoned you, and your fleets have been destroyed or captured. The question now is whether you want to end this war with dignity or fight until every Zephyrian ship has been sunk and every colony occupied by human forces, Captain." Lisa Hayes now wore the uniform of an admiral and served as humanity's representative for galactic peacekeeping operations. She had been promoted for her role in uncovering the original deception and now oversaw the establishment of humanity's new position as the dominant military power in known space. Her job was to maintain order among the dozens of alien civilizations that were adjusting to the new reality. "The Human Federation offers generous terms to all species willing to accept our leadership," Hayes announced to the assembled delegates. "We are not conquerors seeking to build an empire through force, but liberators who want to establish a galactic order based on cooperation rather than submission to a single dominant power." Dr. Amanda Clark had shifted her research from weapons development to defensive technologies and exploration tools as humanity transitioned from desperate survivors to confident galactic leaders. Her teams were working on projects that would benefit all species rather than focusing solely on military applications. The change reflected humanity's evolution from warriors to peacekeepers. "Doctor, our new shield generators can protect entire planets from asteroid impacts and solar radiation," her assistant reported during their weekly progress meeting. "The technology we developed for military purposes is now being adapted to help colonies survive in hostile environments and expand into previously uninhabitable systems." Morrison addressed the Galactic Council and revealed the truth about humanity's greatest deception for the first time. The original peace treaty had been designed from the beginning to be broken because humans never intended to accept vassalage to an alien empire. Every aspect of the agreement had been carefully planned to give humanity the time and opportunity they needed to prepare for total war. "Ladies and gentlemen, 6 months ago, you watched humanity sign a treaty accepting defeat," Morrison explained to the shocked audience. "What you actually witnessed was the opening move in the most elaborate military deception in galactic history. We used your overconfidence against you and turned apparent defeat into the setup for complete victory." Commander Rick Johnson now served as head of the Galactic Intelligence Service and coordinated information sharing between the dozens of species that had joined the new human-led federation. His networks had been in contact with oppressed peoples throughout the former Zephyrian Empire for years and had helped prepare them for the day when humanity could offer an alternative to alien domination. "Director, the integration of former Empire species is proceeding ahead of schedule," his deputy reported. "The Altarians have provided us with detailed intelligence about Zephyrian military installations while the Centaurans are sharing their advanced sensor technology. Everyone wants to contribute to the new galactic order." Chancellor Vextar listened to the terms being offered to his defeated empire and realized that humanity was being more generous than he had any right to expect. The Zephyrian homeworld would be allowed to maintain its independence and his people could participate in the new federation as equals, rather than being enslaved or exterminated as punishment for their aggression. "Admiral, your terms are more than fair," Vextar admitted reluctantly. "My people made the mistake of underestimating yours, and we have paid the price for that arrogance." Perhaps it is time for the galaxy to be led by a species that understands the value of cooperation over conquest. Hayes outlined the structure of the new Galactic Federation, which would be based on principles of mutual defense and shared prosperity, rather than the tribute and submission that had characterized the Zephyrian Empire. Each member species would contribute according to their abilities and receive protection and support from the collective military and economic power of the Federation. The final signing ceremony was broadcast throughout the galaxy as representatives from over 40 different species agreed to join humanity's new galactic order. Morrison signed the founding charter and officially established the human-led Galactic Federation as the successor to the collapsed Zephyrian Empire. The moment marked the beginning of a new era in galactic politics. Dr. Clark announced that her research teams would be sharing advanced technology with all Federation members to help raise the standard of living throughout known space. The weapons technology that had won the war would be converted to peaceful purposes, while new defensive systems would protect all members from external threats or internal conflicts. Johnson revealed that humanity had been building alliances with oppressed species for years before the war began and had always planned to offer them an alternative to Zephyrian rule. What looked like humanity's desperate last stand had actually been the opening phase of a carefully orchestrated campaign for galactic liberation that had taken decades to plan and execute. "My fellow beings," Morrison announced to the Galactic Council as the ceremony concluded. 6 months ago, a treaty promised peace, but that peace was built on the submission of free peoples to an oppressive empire. Today we establish a true peace based on cooperation and mutual respect. Humanity promised to bring war to those who would enslave us, and we delivered on that promise. Now we promise to bring peace to those who choose freedom, and we will deliver on that promise as well. The new galactic order faced many challenges, but for the first time in centuries, the galaxy had hope for a future where conflicts would be resolved through negotiation rather than conquest, and where no single species would dominate all others through superior military force alone.